It's good to see you. My internet has been working actually for the last Sunday. It miraculously happened. It was our Sunday miracle, I suppose. But it's still intermittent on Sunday, so I have a tech guy coming. It's working, and we're really happy about that. And I am trying to be live in 2 places. So I am on YouTube, and I'm also on Facebook Live. So good morning, everyone. Sorry I'm so late, and that's okay. I'm reading from 1 Corinthians chapter 9 today, and then I'll begin with the Shema, and then right to 1 Corinthians 9. Deuteronomy chapter 6 contains the Shema in it. Shema Israel, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your strength. These commandments that I give you today are to be upon your hearts. Impress them on your children. Talk about them when you sit at home and when you walk along the road, when you lie down and when you get up. Tie them as symbols on your hands. Amen. So, 1 Corinthians chapter 9. Am I not free? Am I not an apostle? Have I not seen Jesus our Lord? Are you not the result of my work in the Lord? Even though I may not be an apostle to others, surely I am to you. For you are the seal of my apostleship in the Lord. For this is my defense to those who sit in judgment on me. Don't we have the right to food and drink? Don't we have the right to take a believing wife along with us, as do the other apostles and the Lord's brothers and Cephas? Or is it only I and Barnabas who must work for a living? Who serves as a soldier at his own expense? Who plants a vineyard and does not eat of its grapes? Who tends a flock and does not drink of the milk? Do I say this merely from a human point of view? Doesn't the law say the same thing? For it is written in the law of Moses, do not muzzle an ox while it's treading out the grain. Is it about oxen that God is concerned? Surely he says this for us, doesn't he? Yes, this is written for us because when the plowman plows and the thresher threshes, they ought to do so in the hope of sharing in the harvest. If we have sown spiritual seed among you, is it too much if we recap a material harvest from you? If others have this right of support from you, shouldn't we have it all the more? But we did not use this right. On the contrary, we put up with anything rather than hinder the gospel of Christ. Don't you know that those who work in the temple get their food from the temple, and those who serve at the altar share in what is offered at the altar? In the same way, the Lord has commanded that those who preach the gospel should receive their living from the gospel. But I have not used any of these rights, and I am not writing this in hope that you will do such things for me. I would rather die than have anyone deprive me of this boast. Yet when I preach the gospel, I cannot boast, for I am compelled to preach. Woe to me if I do not preach the gospel. If I preach voluntarily, I have a reward. If not voluntarily, I am simply discharging the trust committed to me. What then is my reward? Just this, that in preaching the gospel, I may offer it free of charge, and so not make use of my rights in preaching it. Though I am free and belong to no man, I make myself a slave to everyone, to win as many as possible. To the Jews, I became like a Jew, to win the Jews. To those under the law, I became like one under the law, so I myself am not under the law, so as to win those under the law. To those not having the law, I became like one not having the law, though I am not free from God's law, but I am under Christ's law, so as to win those not having the law. To the weak, I became weak, to win the weak. I become all things to all men, so that by all possible means I may save some. I do this for the sake of the gospel, that I may share in its blessings. Do you not know that in a race all runners run, but only one gets a prize? Run in such a way as to get a prize. Everyone who competes in the games goes into strict training. They do it to get a crown that will not last. But we do it to get a crown that will last forever. Therefore, I do not run like a man running aimlessly. I do not fight like a man beating the air. No, I beat my body and make it my slave, so that after I preach to others, I myself will not be disqualified for the prize. So good morning, Stephanie. Good morning, Eileen and Jim. Good morning, Kassan. Good morning, Deb. Good morning, Martha. Good morning, Rick. Good morning, Mr. Clegg. How are you? Good morning, Jan. Good morning, Joyce. I got a dog. I got a cat here who loves the attention, I think. That's what I think. She enjoys the attention. Okay. So 1 Corinthians chapter 9. One of the things like struck out, like kind of popped in my head right away, was his way of interpreting about the oxen that God is concerned. Now, of course, it was about the oxen. Like, why would he write it? That's what he's saying. No, there's a scripture, especially the Old Testament, and particularly Torah, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy, Exodus. There's a big principle that's applied. So you look at what this principle is saying. What is this? What is the law? What is it saying? What's it talking about? And then how does that principle, what's the big idea principle? And then how does that apply specifically to my new situation? Minnesota, Dawn, I still want to come see you, but I don't know if I even can with COVID. We love Minnesota. Good morning, Jan. I hope Hunter's doing well. We're praying for him. So this is the big idea of the Old Testament. And when you read the Old Testament, know that it was written for them at that time, but its principles are also meant for our times as well. And so we shouldn't neglect the reading of the Torah, especially. I think we love the historical books, the Kings, and all that is so fun to read. But we kind of tend to neglect. I tend to neglect sometimes the Torah. So I really like the Torah for the big idea principles. So let's just take one for an example. And I'm kind of thinking off the top of my head. So the one that keeps coming up to me is the idea that you shouldn't wear clothes with two kinds of material. So you shouldn't wear a shirt or an outfit that has both wool and cotton, right? That's a law. It's against the law to do that. Okay, so if that's against the law to do that, then what's the big principle? Yikes, that's kind of hard to figure out. I don't even know exactly. So think about it with me. I think for me, like the big principle is trying to live, and I think I said before, like yung mindraka dana biplo, right? We can't walk on two roads. And so if you have a cloth, in their days, right, you had cotton and then you had the wool, and guess what? When that wool gets wet or dries, it's going to shrink up, and the cotton's going to shrink. It's going to be shrinking differently, and you're going to have a big problem, right? And your clothes aren't going to last, or they're going to wear out. They're going to have some major problems. So I think the big principle here is not that I wear a mixed material, but the big principle there is that I shouldn't walk with two ideas, competing ideas, that are contrary to each other. I shouldn't live in the old and in the new. So that's a principle. So I think that's a way that Paul is using the Old Testament. That's how I read that section. It kind of popped in my head. Then the other thing that was really obviously that stands out the most is this idea of preaching the gospel free of anything else. In the same way the Lord has commanded those who preach the gospel to receive the living of the gospel, not that one. But I have not used this right. Where does he say that? There it is. We put up with anything rather than hinder the gospel of Christ. Good morning, Jackie. Tom, I agree. It's like wineskins, right? Jesus says, don't put new wine in old wineskins because you're going to bust the old wineskins. And I think that's the big principle of the mixed materials. That's you can tell me what you think. I'd love to hear what you think about that. So anyway, that's an interpretive method. And I stole it from this paper out of Gordon Conwell on applying biblical principles from the Old Testament. And it makes more sense to me than like the moral, civil, ceremonial, and that's how we divide the Old Testament to understand it. I think that's irrational way of, and too capricious to really understand the Torah. So if he's like, I'm not going to do anything, right? If ever We put up with anything rather than hinder the gospel of Christ. We put up with anything. That's a strong word, right? This is a strong statement. So what does he mean he puts up with anything? So I think, in the early 60s, like my understanding historically, the early 60s, many of the mainline churches, Presbyterian, Lutheran, Methodist, went on kind of a liberal slant. And the young people said, man, we're not here for a liberal political agenda. We're out. And they left, in droves. And one of the reasons they think they left in droves is because they were looking for Jesus, not politics. And then we come into the 90s and 2000s, and the evangelical church, which had prior to that really not had too much of a political concept, kind of went to bed with the Republicans, and so they began to become Jesus and Jesus alone. And I'm not saying that Christians shouldn't be in politics. I think they should, but I don't think it belongs in the pulpit. And so what happened is you have young people who have abandoned the evangelical church in droves. And one of the reasons I think is not of legislative morality. And so I think when Paul writes this, for me, this has influenced the way I have done church for the last 10 years or more, probably for the last 20 years, is that I don't want anything to hinder the gospel of Christ. Good morning, Joanne. So I'm free and belong to no one, right? I'm going to make myself a slave to everyone to win as many as possible. That doesn't mean I'm going to act like a pagan, but I'm going to find the common bridge. I'm going to build a bridge. I think Alpha talks about that. I'm going to build a bridge to that person so that they meet Jesus Christ. So what does it mean? So he said, when I'm with the Jews, I'm going to be like a Jew. Does that mean I'm like fake or phony? I don't think he's saying fake or phony. He's just saying he's able to build that bridge, can relate to every group that he's talking to so that the gospel can get there freely. If I go to somebody and who's Jewish and I'm going to try to give them all this Gentile stuff, that's not going to build that bridge. I need to figure out a way to talk to them from the Torah about Jesus in a way that makes sense to them, right? One of the really interesting lines is, to verse 21, to those not having the law, I became like one not having the law. Now remember, though I am not free from God's law, but I'm under Christ's law. But he's making some kind of distinction here, which is very interesting. Love, Christ is love, right? The law of Christ is love. What is the royal law? To love. So I think he's under the law of love, and see my internet now saying it's unstable. This is why the guy's still coming at 9:30. So just FYI. So really big idea there for me, right? I want to be able to reach everyone possible with the gospel, and I don't want anyone to be hindered because of how I'm living or how I'm presenting the gospel. And then 24, 25, 26, 27. This is a race, and it's not a sprint, right? It's a marathon. I've got to train for it, run in such a way to get the prize. Everyone who competes in the game goes into strict training. I think 25, 26, 27, this whole concept has been abandoned by much of the church, abandoned by me as well. I'm trying to click on he's demonstrating high emotional intelligence and relational sensitivity, which is, I believe, Jesus charging us as good missionaries to be wise as serpents, gentle as doves. Yeah, that's so great, Tom. Emotional intelligence and relational sensitivity. And honestly, right, isn't that the key? That's the key, not just to evangelism and missions. That's the key to life. Relationships are the key. I had to write something a long time ago about my philosophy of ministry, and I remember the sentence was, my philosophy of ministry is relationships, relationship, relationship. And maybe that's silly, but I think that's really what it is. How can you have any other foundation to do ministry and to preach the gospel without relationships? It just requires relationship, because that's trust. You're building trust. So in that 19 through 20 is 23 is how do I build trust and create relationships so the gospel can go forward? And so then he's like, and not only do I want the gospel to go forward, but I want the gospel to go forward, and then I myself am out, right? Like this is the key. We've seen ministry after ministry after ministry who had all this effect on their congregation and in their city. They're doing such great things. And then, no, I beat my body and make it my slave so that after I have preached to others, I myself will not be disqualified for the prize. He's still concerned about his own soul. And it starts with a relationship with him. That's right, Stephanie. So relationship with God, relationship with self, relationship with others. And I think it's that order. That's my order, right? Relationship with God, that's my first order. Second order, relationship with myself. Because the more I know myself, the more I know God. And then relationship with others, because they're all image bearers of God. So I think for me, like, that's the whole relationship component. And this 24 to 27 is his relationship with self. And he's like, I'm going to make sure that I'm disciplined enough, right? Even how I treat my physical body. I don't think this is metaphorical. Everyone's like, oh, it's a metaphor. I don't think Paul's talking metaphorically at all. There is a metaphor of the race. That's metaphorical, right? The race, the fighting. But I think that he treated his body not as an ascetic, but he treated his body with a discipline. Where is it? It's in chapter 7 or 8, where he's like, I'm not going to be mastered by anything. No one's going to master. I'm not going to be mastered by food. I'm not going to be mastered by anything. And that's right. And we just got done reading it. And so he's saying the same thing. He just repeated. He's going back to that principle. Nothing's going to master me because I'm mastering my body. Relationship with God, relationship with self, relationship with others. I beat my body, make it my slave, so that after I preach to others, I myself will not be disqualified for the prize. It's a long-term race. It's a marathon for sure. And it's a marathon for the gospel. And it's a great word today from 1 Corinthians. So what am I taking from it? The way of understanding the Old Testament and just the beauty of the Old Testament. You know, I love the Torah. And also this idea that I'm not going to attach myself to anything that's going to hinder the gospel. I'm not going to be so red that I hinder the blue, right? Telling the flesh what to do rather than permitting the flesh to tell him what to do. That's right. It's really about mastering the flesh, right? Because we still are living in these bodies of flesh, so we've got to master them. So I'm not going to do anything. I'm not going to live a certain way that hinders my relationship. I told you yesterday how I do that so easily. So I don't want to do that. I want to be able to make a bridge so that the gospel is clear. And then I want to make sure that myself is good, that I'm disciplining myself, and that the flesh is not in charge, and nothing is my master except for the Lord himself. So big words today, and a lot to take home for me and how I need to live my life today. So God bless you guys. Have a fantastic Tuesday, and I will see you tomorrow, Wednesday. Have a good one. Bye-bye.